The street was the kind people bragged about. Quiet, tree-lined, lawns trimmed on the same day every week. Neighbors who waved even if they didn't know your name. That's why it felt wrong the first time he noticed something was off. It happened on a Tuesday morning just after sunrise. Mark had lived on Kilmer Street for almost 8 years, long enough to recognize every car and every routine. So when he stepped outside to grab his newspaper and saw the entire block lined with parked vehicles, he paused. Black sedans, vans, a few unfamiliar cars pulled halfway onto curbs. At the end of the street, people stood in small clusters, dressed in dark clothing. Some whispered, some hugged. No one laughed. Mark scanned for a moving truck, a construction crew, something that made sense. Then he noticed the casket. It sat near the corner, closed, dark with polish to a dull shine. Someone adjusted flowers on top of it. A funeral procession. On his street. He felt embarrassed more than scared at first. Funerals were private things. Maybe a relative of someone nearby. Maybe he'd missed a notice or a conversation. Still, as he stepped onto the sidewalk, the nearest neighbor stiffened. Mrs. Halvorsen, who used to bring banana bread every Christmas, froze mid-sentence. Her smile collapsed like it had been erased. She looked right past him. Mark cleared his throat. Morning. No response. He tried again, louder this time, to a man he recognized from 2 houses down. Hey, sorry, who died? The man's jaw tightened. He glanced toward the casket, then away. You should go back inside, he said quietly. Why? There was a beat too long before the answer. You're not supposed to be here. Mark laughed, confused. It's my street. The man flinched at that, like he'd said something wrong. Across the road, a woman's voice hissed, sharp and urgent. Don't talk to him. That was when Mark realized everyone was avoiding looking directly at him. Eyes slid off his face like he wasn't fully there. Conversations died the moment he stepped closer. He backed away, heat crawling up his neck, and returned to his house. From his front window, he watched them lower the casket into the ground. No one knocked. No one explained. By noon, the cars were gone. By evening, the street looked normal again, except for a fresh patch of dirt near the corner, marked with a temporary sign bearing a name Mark couldn't quite read from that distance. He told himself it was nothing. Neighborhood tension. People were strange around death. The next morning, his mailbox was empty. No junk mail. No bills. No newspaper. He checked again that evening. Still nothing. By the third day, his name was missing from the community message board online. Not deleted, just gone, like it had never been there. His login still worked, but every post he'd ever made had vanished. When he called the HOA, the line rang until it disconnected. At the grocery store, his card declined. At work, security stopped him at the door. You don't work here, the guard said, squinting at the screen. I've worked here 5 years. The guard hesitated, scrolling. There's no record of you. Mark drove home shaking. That night, someone taped a note to his door. Please stop. No signature. Just those 2 words, written carefully, like a warning meant to sound polite. He marched to the Halvorsen's house and knocked until the porch light flicked on. Mrs. Halvorsen opened the door a crack, chain still latched. You need to leave, she whispered. Tell me what's going on. Her eyes filled, not with fear, but guilt. We agreed not to talk to you. Agreed with who? With everyone. He noticed something behind her on the wall. Framed certificates, family photos. In every one, the space where a neighbor might have stood was empty, blurred, or cut off. Her voice trembled. You were already gone. Talking to you makes it worse. Worse than what? She swallowed hard, then letting it finish. She closed the door. Sleep stopped coming after that. Mark lay awake each night, listening to the ticking of his kitchen clock, the hum of a refrigerator that felt louder than before. Sometimes he thought he heard footsteps outside, slow, measured, passing his house but never stopping. On the 4th night, he found the envelope. It was tucked behind a stack of old mail in a drawer, yellowed like it had been there for years. Inside was a death certificate, his full name, date of birth, address, Cause of death, accidental, unspecified. And at the bottom, a signature. His signature. Written in shaky ink. Dated 3 weeks earlier. He didn't remember signing anything. Didn't remember an accident. Didn't remember being sick or drunk or hurt. The realization hit him like ice water. The neighbors hadn't buried him because they wanted him gone. They buried him because they remembered him dying. And remembering was enough. The street had decided. Reality had started to follow. The next morning, Mark tried to leave. His car wouldn't start. Not broken, just dead, like the battery had never existed. As the sun rose, he watched curtains twitch along the street. People checking to see if he was still there. By afternoon, the house across from his was listed for sale. The sign went up without warning, like preparation. By dusk, his reflection began to lag behind his movements in the hallway mirror. That night, there was a knock. Not on the front door. From under the house. Slow, deliberate, as if something beneath the floor remembered him and was waiting for him to remember back. In the morning, the patch of dirt at the end of Kilmer Street had a new headstone. Temporary. Simple. The name was clear now. Mark Holloway. The neighbors finally stopped watching, and the house at number 12 went quietly empty. No one on the street talks about what happened. They don't need to. They all remember him being buried, and that, apparently, is enough to make it true. He had been driving the same route for months, enough to memorize every turn, every streetlight, every quiet corner where passengers sometimes lingered too long. Jake was a rideshare driver, tired but careful, and that week had been worse than usual. Long hours, little sleep, and the city buzzing with a heat that made everyone irritable. It started on a Thursday night. He pulled up to a dimly lit apartment building. A woman was waiting, her shoulders hunched, hair hanging over her face. When she got in, she didn't say a word. Not a greeting. Not an address. Nothing. Jake shrugged. Some people were quiet. He glanced in the rearview mirror. Her reflection didn't move, didn't adjust when he checked her. Just there. He shook it off. Maybe fatigue. By the next morning, he noticed a smell. Faint, like damp clothing mixed with something metallic. It lingered in the back seat even after he cleaned it. That night, passengers started behaving oddly. One man refused the back seat entirely. "I'll take the front," he muttered, staring at the back as if it had a life of its own. A few days later, condensation started forming on the rear windows, even in dry weather. Small smudges, fingerprints that weren't his, streaks he couldn't wipe away. The quiet woman seemed to linger longer than she should, always seated in the same spot, watching the road. By the third day, Jake began noticing her reflection in the rearview mirror during quiet hours. When the streets were empty, on the news that afternoon, he saw her face flashed across the screen. Missing for 3 days. He laughed nervously. "No way," he whispered to himself. "It's not." A soft, almost inaudible click echoed from the seatbelt. He looked back. The belt tightened, slowly, as if someone had fastened it. Alone, panicked, he pulled over, flung open the back door. Empty. Just a faint smell lingering. The window streaked with condensation. He drove home, heart hammering, lights blurring past him. He checked the news again. Her disappearance. The city searching. Every report repeating the same details. The following night, he dared to look in the trunk. A flash of memory, or maybe fear, made him hesitate. The trunk latch clicked. Inside, nothing. Empty. By then, Jake was barely sleeping. Every time he glanced in the rearview mirror, he thought he saw movement, a shadow shifting in the back seat when no one was there. Sometimes a voice, soft and distant, whispering, "Drive. Keep driving." 3 nights later, the police showed up at his apartment. Jake Williams. He nodded, sweating confused. They asked questions, and his mind raced. Then they said something that made his blood run cold. "We found her body in your trunk. Days ago." Jake froze. What would he mean? That's impossible. I checked. A detective leaned in. Witnesses say she's still been getting into cars. Jake's vision blurred. He remembered the clicks of the seatbelt, the condensation, the smell that never left. The whispers. He realized then what had been happening. The woman wasn't haunting the car. She wasn't a ghost. She was reliving it over and over, trapped in the moments before she finally stopped escaping. Jake never got a clear answer. The case made the news, but no one could explain why her spirit, or whatever it was, kept replaying the final hours of her disappearance. And sometimes, late at night, Jake swears he hears the faintest rustle in the backseat, a whisper urging him to drive just a little farther. 7 years. That's how long the Anderson family had been waiting. 7 years since David, their youngest, disappeared without a trace in the backyard one summer evening. So he walked to the front door, unannounced, dirty and thin, with a backpack slung over his shoulder. They barely recognized him as the same boy who had vanished all those years ago. Tears, laughter, disbelief, they celebrated. Photos were taken. Friends came over. News cameras even showed up. But almost immediately, something was off. David wouldn't sleep. Not a wink. No matter how exhausted he looked, he stayed awake, sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at the walls, listening. The family assumed trauma. Night terrors. Flashbacks. They thought it was just the aftermath of being gone so long. He ate, but never tasted. He followed routines, but never remembered the little moments that made the house theirs. And then the pictures. One night, his mother brought out a photo album filled with old family photos, birthday parties, school plays. David flipped through them slowly, his face pale. "Why are they all standing in the wrong places?" he whispered, his voice shaking. "What do you mean?" his father asked. David's hands trembled as he turned the pages. "The people in these photos, they weren't the ones who raised me. None of them. They only exist when the lights are off. If I fall asleep, I'll go back to them. And I can't. I can't let them touch me again." The room went silent. His words sank in slowly. The family tried to comfort him, telling him it was safe now. He shook his head violently. "They taught me," he said, voice breaking. "If I ever return, I must never sleep. They look like you, sound like you, even smell like you, but they're not real. Only I will disappear if I fall asleep." The lights flickered that night. Shadows stretched along the walls. David stayed awake, staring at the ceiling, clutching a pillow, refusing to blink. And for the first time, the Andersons noticed something wrong. Their own reflections in the windows were slightly off. The angles of their faces didn't match the shapes in the glass. David finally whispered, almost to himself, "I'm not sure you're really here either." The family froze. Outside, the wind howled. The house felt heavier, older, like it was closing in. And David stayed awake, watching, listening, and knowing that the people around him, the very people who look like family, might never be real at all. If you enjoyed the story and want more like it, make sure you subscribe, turn on notifications, and drop a comment telling what kind of horror story you want next.